Welcome to another awakening game. We've often heard that the truth or the absolute is beyond space and time. You've heard that, right? We've actually already seen through these awakening games that it's beyond time. Remember those games where I brought my clock with the second hand? And we watched the second hand as we focused on consciousness. And we were able to see that consciousness was still, was always the present in consciousness. Even though the second hand seemed to be showing us time, we were able to see the stillness of consciousness. The appearance of time was within consciousness, which means that consciousness is beyond time. But again, the saying is that the absolute is beyond both space and time. So we haven't played an awakening game yet that lets us see that it's beyond space. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to start with a little geometry lesson, and I am not a geometry expert, so forgive my geometry lesson in advance, please. But this is a picture of the three dimensions. The first dimension is represented by a line because it only has one dimension to it, which is length. Whether the line seems to go left to right, or whether the line seems to go up and down, it's still just the length of the line. There's no real width to it. When you add width, you get to two dimensions. You have both length and width, right? Length, how long it is, or we could call this height in this case because it goes up and down, and width. So you have two dimensions. Now, when you get to the third dimension, you have your length and your width, but you also add depth. And the way they're showing it here, they're calling it height, length, and then width. But this I would call the depth. Right? This is the depth, how deep it is. Like I was recently shopping for a refrigerator for the condo in La Vida, and I had to look at how high the refrigerator was because there's cabinets over the top. I had to look at how high. I had to look at how wide because there's a wall on one side and cabinets on the other. And then I had to look at how deep because there's only so much room or else I wouldn't even be able to open up the refrigerator door, right? So that the refrigerator is three-dimensional, right? It has height, it has width, and it has depth, 3 dimensions. Now, here's a picture of a helicopter. And this helicopter appears to have 3 dimensions. You know, it appears to have some length from the tail to the nose. It appears to have some height from the bottom to the top. And it appears to have some depth to it. But that's just an illusion because there's no depth to the paper. The paper's only 2-dimensional, right? The paper has width and length or height, but it has no depth. So nothing drawn on the paper can actually have depth. It can only have the illusion of depth. So whenever you're dealing with a piece of paper, you can't get beyond 2 dimensions. All right, that's the end of the geometry lesson. We're going to start playing the game with this drawing. And this drawing, interestingly, also shows 0 dimensions, right? If you look at the dot doesn't have length or width. It's just a dot, right? So we have the 0 dimension. We have 1 dimension. We have just the length, which in this case we could call height because it goes up and down. We have the 2 dimensions. We have the length or the height and the width. And then we have the 3 dimensions or the appearance, the illusion of 3 dimensions. It appears to add width, but as we know, it doesn't really because it's on a piece of paper. So here's the game. This is how we start the game. What I want you to do is I want you to look at these different dimensions. Spatial dimensions. They represent spatial dimensions. And I want you to keep your eyes on these dimensions. But I want you to focus on consciousness, or if you can, focus on awareness, that which is aware of consciousness, right? Either one will do. Doesn't matter. Focus on consciousness or focus on awareness, but keep your eyes on the dimensions. Just like we did last week when we were doing the open-eyed meditation. Your eyes stay on the dimensions. Your attention is on consciousness or awareness. And notice that each of these dimensions is within consciousness or within awareness. It's not like the 0 and the first and the second dimension are within awareness, but the third dimension is somehow outside of awareness, right? It's an awareness too. Zero dimension within awareness, one dimension within awareness, two dimensions within awareness, three dimensions within awareness. Again, keep the attention with consciousness or awareness and the eyes on the drawing, but notice they're all within consciousness. They're all within awareness. Now, of course, even though there's a representation of the third dimension, what we know is that it's really only two dimensions because the piece of paper has no depth to it. So let's bring in a true three-dimensional world. Look out wherever you are at. If you're in a room, look at the room. If you're outside, look at the environment outside. And now what you're looking at are three dimensions. When I look at the room that I'm in, I can see the length of the room. I can see the length of this wall. I can see the height of the room from the floor to ceiling. And there's also a width to this room. I have length, height, and width. I have three dimensions. Or I could call the length depth if I wanted to. I could say I have height, width, and depth. Doesn't really matter what you call the three dimensions. But I have three dimensions. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one object in the room. I'm going to keep my eyes focused on that object. You do the same thing. With my peripheral vision, I'm going to notice the three dimensions. The height, the width, the depth. I'm going to keep my eyes on one object. With my peripheral vision, I'm noticing the three dimensions. And then I'm going to expand my awareness a little further. I'm going to focus on awareness while my eyes are on one object and my peripheral vision is on the three dimensions. So eyes on one object, peripheral vision on three dimensions, attention on awareness or consciousness. Eyes on one object, perceptual vision is taking in all three dimensions, and attention is on the still awareness or consciousness. Now notice that all three dimensions, true dimensions, are within awareness. The height, the depth, the width is all within awareness. And then look at awareness itself. Notice it is dimensionless. It is dimensionless. It is beyond space. If there's a dot, a 0 dimension, that's within awareness. If there's a length, 1 dimension, that's within awareness. If there's a length and width, 2 dimensions, that's within awareness. And if there's length, width, and depth, that is within awareness as well. But awareness itself has no dimension. It's as if space is within it, but it is not space or dimension at all. Three dimensions reside within it, but it has no height, no length, no width. It's dimensionless or beyond space. It's not flat. It's not round. It's not deep. It's not square. It's beyond space, beyond the three dimensions. So that's the game. And if you want to go online, you can print a picture, like one fun picture is this picture of SpongeBob. He's two-dimensional, right? He has length and width, but he doesn't have any depth. So you can go find a nice, two-dimensional picture online, print it, and you'll start the game this week by looking at the two-dimensional object and noticing that it is within awareness. So your eyes are on the two-dimensional object. Your attention is on awareness or consciousness. And you notice that the two-dimensional object is within awareness. And then when you feel good with that, you put that down and you look at the three-dimensional world. Keep your eyes still on one object. Notice the three dimensions with peripheral vision, but keep your attention on awareness or consciousness. And notice that the three-dimensional world is within awareness. The two-dimensional world is within awareness. But awareness has no dimension to it because it is beyond space. There's a fun movie you could watch while you're doing this contemplation this week. Let me share my screen. I'll show it to you. You can get it on YouTube. Here it is. It's called Flatland, the film, and it was made in 2007. Flatland, the film. This is a fun film about two-dimensional characters that live in a two-dimensional world. And one of them gets brought into a three-dimensional world, which the two-dimensional characters had never seen before. And when this one comes back and tries to tell them about depth is something they can't imagine, right? Because they only know this. They only know that, so as if they live on a sheet of paper and they're flat, right? They're flat characters. They only know length and width. They have no knowledge of depth. It's kind of resembles awakening, as if somebody had awakened to this third dimension and then came back and tried to tell the second dimension people about this other dimension, and they couldn't understand. So it's kind of a fun film. But as you're watching the film, if you choose to watch it, keep in mind that whether the world was one-dimensional, just a bunch of dots, or whether the world was two-dimensional, if we were flat on a piece of paper living, or whether it's our three-dimensional world, it's all within awareness. And awareness is the same, right? Awareness is the same if it was a dot world, a zero-dimensional world, a one-dimensional world, lines, a two-dimensional world, these flat shapes, or a three-dimensional world. Awareness is the same. So again, practice with the game that I taught you. If you get a chance, go watch Flatland and notice that awareness, which is right here, right now with you, is beyond space. And as we've already seen, it's also beyond time. And I'll see you next week with another awakening game. Bye.